had it not happened during the pandemic, these conversations, these wouldn't even really occur, because I think the stillness allowed for clarity of thought and allowed people to not have distractions of like normal day-to-day life. And while some people necessarily weren't hugely impacted by what has happened and it's continuing to happen, I feel like a general consensus meant that most people were able to actually realize the severity of the situation, and with what happened in America spilling out across the world and forcing maybe uncomfortable conversations to happen here in the UK, and shine a light on like our history and our present and maybe what the future can be.
I think initially I felt like it could be just a moment, a bit like when Philando Castile was murdered and Eric Garner, and there was uprisings. For me, what made this time feel different was that it really motivated everyone to come together here and across the world, not just in America, but there were other countries also standing up and saying no. And I think for me, this is in history is going to look back at this time and it's not going to be a moment.
It feels less like a moment and more, it feels like a movement. And I think we should all feel like it is a movement, and we shouldn't, a moment implies that it is transient. At some point it is going to end. I think that George Floyd has literally changed the world, and his death particularly reminded us all of how little Black lives do matter. And if they are going to matter, then this really can't be a moment, and it has to be a movement. And this movement has jogged us out of our complacency or our lots of people's apathy, and it has forced people of colour to recognise that we're having an existential crisis, and we are forced to look at all of the identity politics that make up who we are and who society says we are, and who fundamentally we should be inside. So I think we should all consider it to be a movement. I think, if I'm honest, I think people who refer to it as a moment, I think that's just a way to slightly politicise where we are right now. And I think we should try to divorce this from politics, because it's way more than that. It's a humanitarian issue.
I know that change is happening, both, across the world with the Black Lives Matter movement, and then obviously how it's impacting on our industry. On the other hand, there is a part of me where gets burnt out and gets exhausted, because part of the process is saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again in many different spaces to sometimes your own community. When I say own community, I mean like the Black community, the Black arts community, people who you work with, your colleagues, your family, your friend, all of those things. And then, sitting in those same spaces, sometimes the play, like your own drama school, like myself, and going back there and saying exactly the same thing that you said 10 years ago. But because it's a hashtag now, it's kind of like people are finally sitting down and able to listen.
This definitely feels like a movement, but I think it's always felt like a movement to me. It's always been present for me. And as much as it has felt like a movement for some of my other Black male friends, for them, they very much were like, they knew for some of their non-Black friends that this was a moment for them, but not yet a movement. And this particular time is a shift in the movement. But I think, even for some of my friends, they are seeing it as just a defining moment, but not necessarily a movement that is going to continue consistently in their lives, because it doesn't have necessarily a ripple effect in their everyday life. So it just kind of becomes moments rather than an actual movement every day moving forward.
At the moment, I'm really trying my hardest to be a glass half full kind of guy, which, to be honest, isn't my natural disposition. Not that I try and see the world negatively, but, I think I'm a bit of a realist. So sometimes that kind of eternal optimism I struggle with. But I'm trying to be as optimistic as I can with this movement in terms of making sure that within our industry that these kind of promises aren't just for show, and that they aren't just so that they can be seen like they're doing something.
It shouldn't have to take a pandemic and for us not to be doing anything for people to kind of realize, oh wait, there are these things that are happening that we don't acknowledge. And it's just the systematic racism is so deep and has been going on for so long. It's going to take more than just 6 months of lockdown for us to be like, oh yeah, okay, now there's really going to be some change. There'll be little steps taken, and you know, there are things that are happening to push us in the right direction. But I don't know. I just feel like once COVID's done and we're all getting back to business and everybody's on their tubes and minding their own business, like it's just, I don't feel like there's going to be much of a change. Like it's sad because my mum was saying, she was like, I don't think racism is going to end in my lifetime. And like, she's not that old. She's in her 60s. She's got a good 30, 40 summers left. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's just kind of like, to hear her say that, and you know, she was born in Liverpool, she's lived in London, she moved to Hertfordshire, and it's just like, you know, she's seen it from the north to the south of the country, and it's like she just thinks it's not going to change anytime soon. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I think it's a moment, a very poignant moment, and something that, you know, that has been taken note of, but I don't know if it'll carry.
Part of me feels that it is a flash in the pan, but then when I go deeper and I speak to people like yourself or to other friends of mine in the industry, it feels like there is a slow progression happening. The reason why I feel like it is a flash in the pan is because if COVID hadn't happened, people would be on their summer holidays by now. And people are taking their summer holidays. They're going to Greece, they're going to Turkey. And I feel like, where is the consistency of the effort, which was 4 weeks ago, last month? Where is that consistent effort of still talking about Black Lives Matter, still talking about people who aren't white? Where do we all fit in? And what are the kind of the efforts being made, and are they still being done with the same consistency? And I don't think they are. I feel like it's dropped off.
I think regarding everything that's been happening, I think it's a bit fashionable. I definitely feel like there's some power words being used and power phrases that's kind of seem hip and in current. I think we've had loads of these movements and moments throughout the years, you know. Go back to like the 80s and the 90s when we had the Real McCoy, great, that was a movement. And then we had, you know, a movement through Channel 4 where we did have a different world. We had Hang on Mr. Cooper, we had quite a few, you know, Desmonds, we had a few black programs that were being shown, and then that was a phase that just ended. So I think unfortunately it feels like it's a moment in time. I think this country, or how the industry stands at the moment, it feels like we can only process moments, which is a shame, because yes, we want a movement and we want to set change. And it does just seem fashionable, because at one point, you know, you would never have had someone like Keith Lemon been able to do masks of black people, essentially black up as far as I'm concerned, and then all of a sudden he was allowed to have a series that ran for how many years? But again, that's kind of been highlighted now, and that moment has stopped. So I just think the way how the industry goes, they can't handle a full movement, unfortunately. I feel like it is just moments. But I do feel like the way how I've approached the industry is to take advantage of those moments where I can, to try and at least, you know, open a door and try and hold it open as much as I can. But unfortunately, I feel like it's all just a moment.
It seems that people are listening, but I already can see there's a lot of work, and we're in a generation now where things are so quick. We can like tweet and we can post about this feeling and not actually act on that feeling. That's a very different thing. So I think a lot of it needs to be acted on, and I think in our industry people really need to start listening to how we feel and our experiences for things to change. So don't take your foot off the gas, just keep going now, because that's the way things are going to change.
Considering the states that you know, the industry is in right now. I think, you know, in terms of like the infrastructure of our industry, you know, that is currently being destroyed by the pandemic and the government's lack of support for it, you would like to think that there is a chance for us to like rebuild the power structures of it from, you know, the bottom, actually the top even.
Until the arts change, like the upper echelons of the art industry change, we're not going to see the repercussions like make their way down the ladder. And I feel like those people need to accept that it's not just a moment, and they can't just be like, yeah, cool, we celebrate diversity, and then not put their money where their mouth is. So for the gatekeepers to accept that it's a movement will mean that everyone else understands the complexities of the situation as well.
You'd like to think that because of what we've seen this year in terms of the surge of awareness and engagement with the issues that are going on, as I'd said, like, I'd like to think that we could actually make some kind of tangible, real change.
For some people, they're like, oh yeah, I celebrate for a moment, or I raised awareness, I posted a black square, or, you know, I hashtag Black Lives Matter, I'm good. So until the people that were uncomfortable with it being more than a moment acknowledge that, it won't become a movement, because we need everyone to accept that it's a movement.
I know that young people, young black and brown people, have experienced things and haven't been in this kind of a seismic shift before, and I know that their energy is not going to allow it to go back to what it was before.
It's all about pressure and keeping the movement alive. I don't think it will pass. I don't think it can pass because it's been so big. But I think if we allow things to go back to the way they were, then yeah, I think it will be even worse.
I think this is a movement. I think we're in the midst of a movement. I don't think this is a moment. I think we have a moment to accelerate the movement at this time. I'll say that. Yeah. We're kind of in acceleration mode right now, you know?
I think it's really important to know that we can take up space now. Now is the time more than ever that people want to hear us. People want to hear our stories, our experiences. They're willing to listen and not just kind of passively say, oh, that's a shame, I'm sorry you went through that. I think people actively want to change it now.
We are actually powerful people. We really have value, and we can often feel like we have to make ourselves small or cater to people, or people won't value us. But the truth is, like, black culture often sets the culture, and there is power in it. So we can hold people directly accountable. So I don't know how it's going to affect other people, but for me as an artist, I feel incredibly empowered, and it feels like a movement in my life. Like I'm just like moving mad. Like I feel so powerful as an artist now, because I can refer to the specific thing someone said on May the 3rd and be like, what are you doing? When before I didn't have that leverage. So it feels great. And even if people are interested in a year's time, I'm still gonna hold that receipt. Like, I've screenshotted it, it's there. So yeah.
It's like a rolling wave. It's like once it starts, it can't stop. The outcome has got to be that we wash away all that came before and start anew. I just can't see. I personally am taking responsibility of making sure momentum is kept up. I know other people are taking responsibility of making sure momentum is kept up. So I can't see how it can go back to same old, same old.
But there's also us understanding as black artists is the internalized racism that we ultimately have to heal from as well. And knowing that when we are putting things into action, are we moving from a place of healing, or are we moving from a place of kind of repeating the pattern of the oppressor? Are we reenacting the white supremacy Is it from internalized racism? There is a lot of deep-seated internalized racism that we have to move from, and it means that we have to kind of do our homework.
But as for it being a movement, I don't think it's a movement yet. I think we're below grassroots now. We're at like germination or something. People have just had the space to understand what is happening. But to effectively make change, we need like full mobilizations, and social media allows us to punch slogans without fully taking the time to understand what those slogans mean and what that comes from. So I don't feel like we are a movement yet unless we're listening, truly listening to each other and not just shouting.
So I'm hoping, we've had these discussions with the producers or the directors, they've called and they've asked the questions. I just really hope, I'm trying to be as hopeful as possible that it's going to be put into action and that change will be affected. I'm trying my hardest to stay at that point. I've decided that until I'm proven otherwise, I'm going to go with that kind of optimism. But as soon as, if I get proven otherwise, I'm no longer going to, not that I ever really did, but I'm no longer going to sit back and allow that kind of rhetoric to happen and take place. I'm going to say. And if they don't expect it, then they should be.